Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education, featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Tutoring Tips episode on the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is Aaron Kahn of Prepped and Polished. Please be sure to check out our website, www.preppedandpolished.com. For tutoring in person or online, call us at 781-753-9951 or chat with us instantly on our website. You can join our Prepped and Polished community on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Prepped and Polished. If you have any questions after the show, please ask us a question on our chat feature on our website. We love hearing from you. Now, let's get right into episode 225 on how to create and use an ACT-SAT formula sheet. When dealing with both the ACT and SAT math sections, specifically for the SAT with both the no calculator and calculator section, it's important to know how to create a math formula review sheet. There are a couple things to consider depending on if you're going with the ACT or the SAT. For both of them, you definitely want to know the content areas of the test. The ACT typically has more content as tested on it than the SAT. For the ACT, you can expect concepts on arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, including all kinds of trig identities and graphing, as well as special topics such as logs, matrices, vectors, and high-end probability. When you're considering both formulas you know and ones that you don't know, you want to add both onto your list. Especially ones that you say you know, it's a good way to practice and review different ways that those questions may be asked. For example, if you know how to solve for the average or the mean, consider different ways that questions may come up. For example, if you're being asked, here are 5 numbers, find the average, that's fairly easy. But what if you're given the average of 5 numbers? Then you are asked to eliminate one of those numbers and have a new average. It is then important to know how you get there. So when you're looking at your list, consider both formulas that you know and you don't know. Sometimes it's easier to throw in an example of that formula, such as in terms of fractional exponents. You can memorize that the b root of x to the a power equals x to the a over b power, but that is a lot of variables in the mix. Instead, consider a practical example. X to the 1/2 power is equal to the square root of x. This allows you then to easily memorize that rule through an example. You also don't want to forget any procedures or process rules that allow you to answer certain questions. These can include and not limited to geometry proofs, identities, and certain step-by-step processes. For example, for systems of equations, you have 2 options, elimination or substitution, and it's important to know both routes. As for the SAT, it is also important to know your algebra, geometry, and trigonometry. In terms of the trigonometry, it might be more basic concepts such as SOHCAHTOA and how to identify different parts of a right triangle. Since the SAT has a formula list on both the calculator and no calculator section, it might not seem necessary to have these on your list, but in actuality, it really is important to include them so that you don't forget how to use them come the test day. Beyond the scope of what's listed on the sheet for both the SAT no calculator and SAT calculator section, consider adding a few more practice examples or practice problems for you to learn. Once your formula sheet is created, you have to study it. And the most important thing is to develop a routine of studying. Typically, what I recommend for most students is to do the following. Find a time in your schedule that you know you have at least somewhere between 5 to 10 or 15 minutes to study every single day. Everyone has a little bit of time nowadays to put this into their schedule, so take advantage of this. If you review a little bit every day over a long period of time, that will help solidify the information in your brain. as opposed to the short-term and long hours studying method that typically students do the day before, or in worst case scenario, the day of the test. Now, I understand each person is different, but usually 5 to 10 minutes, maybe even twice a day, is given enough time before the test should allow your brain to acclimate to this new information, or old information if it's something you've been studying this year, to then learn it, mimic it, understand it, and apply it to the test. Now, in the instance that you don't have enough time, which it can be a possibility, what's important is to find those formulas and procedures or processes to solve equations that you're having difficulty with and start there. You might not have as much time to go over those that you already know, and in this case, you would rather deal with the unknown first than the known. Another thing you can do is that if you don't do well studying on your own, I would recommend finding a study buddy, someone who you can study with, or maybe even split the workload of creating a formula sheet and then bringing both your formulas together and studying together in an effective and goal-oriented situation. If you have some friends who are taking the SAT or the ACT, it might be worthwhile to pair up with them so you both can benefit from studying together and testing each other's knowledge on the topic. This will also help build support between you two or in a group setting so that when you're going into the test, you feel like you're not the only one taking it. Now, one final note that I mentioned earlier is that when you're creating your formula sheet, it's good for you to have a separate sheet of paper with practice problems that either you've realized through your studying that you don't understand, or further example problems through which you can study certain procedural steps and processes to solve certain questions. Usually, I recommend is numbering the question types on the formula sheet to correspond to specific questions and problems that you're doing on this sheet. In terms of finding problems, I would recommend either going online, using official test guides, or ask your tutor to help create problems that are specifically challenging for you to do. And of course, in this case, you want to do step-by-step processes so you understand what you need to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to solving your answer. This wraps up our show, episode 225, on how to create and use an ACT/SAT formula sheet. Please be on the lookout for our next podcast episode, number 226. Thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.